Hello and welcome to Full Court Press. I'm Greta Van Susteren. A growing crisis in Afghanistan. Thousands of people are trying to flee the country as the Taliban begins to govern. President Biden says if necessary, U.S. troops will stay in Afghanistan beyond August 31st to help evacuate Americans. U.S. forces have also evacuated thousands of Afghans. Some have been relocated to the United States as special immigrants. Scenes near Kabul airport show chaos and crowds desperate to get inside. NATO officials say since the Taliban took control on Sunday, several people have been killed near Kabul airport. Many fear the Taliban could carry out revenge attacks on those Afghans who worked with Americans or the government. The Taliban says it will protect women's rights, forgive those who fought against them, and prevent the country from becoming a base for terror attacks. But world leaders and the people of Afghanistan are skeptical. Joining us, Congressman Jake Auchincloss. He is a Marine who served in Afghanistan in 2012. He also led combat patrols against the Taliban. We see these horrible videos of people like dropping from planes. I mean, it's heartbreaking of what's going on and has been going on at the airports. Some people have suggested, would there have been any harm just to leave the 2,500 people there and sort of maintain the status quo? I mean, would there have been any harm just to leave some soldiers there and not risk the lives of so many Afghans?
The status quo of 2,500 was not an option. And let me just be clear about why. The reason there have been no combat casualties, the reason that there was an intermission in fighting over the last year is that Donald Trump and his administration were negotiating with the Taliban in Doha. And the Taliban were resisting combat because the Trump administration promised them unilateral withdrawal, no conditions, by May 1st. So when President Biden took office, it was not like, okay, 2,500, kind of keep along for another year or two. No, it was go big or go home. So the president was either going to double down on a third decade of conflict, or he was going to finally wrap up a counterinsurgency that had not been successful.
You were in Afghanistan in 2012. Tell me what it was like.
I commanded a platoon that was patrolling 3 Taliban-contested villages along the Helmand River at the tail end of the Obama surge. And as we were patrolling these villages, there was a maxim amongst the Taliban. They would say, you have the watches, we have the time. What that meant is that they knew Americans could outfight them, but they could outlast us. They could outlast us because to successfully end a counterinsurgency, you need a political endgame. You need a partner who can provide better services, confidence in the rule of law, and a flourishing civil society. Americans never had a strong political partner in Afghanistan.
Did you find that the Afghan people that you worked alongside with, did they have the will? Did they want the United States there? I mean, what was their sort of feeling about all this?
I patrolled alongside the Afghan unit police, and they were tactically sound. They cared about their homeland. What we saw in the rapid Taliban advance is less a story about Taliban horsepower and more a story about Afghan willpower, and specifically Afghan central government and senior command and control. They had $80+ billion of American support for their military and their Air Force, and they couldn't even get bullets and rations to their front lines. If I were an Afghan security trooper on the front lines and I knew that, my morale would crater too.
You also wrote an op-ed in January of 2020. Let me quote part of it. You said that invasion, meaning of Afghanistan, achieved nothing of strategic significance, not then, not since. On patrol through Taliban villages, the falsehoods and the jingoism that beat the drums of war back home, meaning here in the United States, were quickly made hollow, and all that was left was roadside bombs, scared villagers, and demoralized young Marines. I guess, I mean, that suggests to me that you thought that this was a failure back in 2012 and a failure in 2020.
That's right. This mission in Afghanistan began as a counterterrorism mission after 9/11. And hearing President Bush's speeches in the months afterwards are actually quite remarkable because he articulates a narrowly scoped, appropriate mission. Counterterrorism to deny a base of operations to those who would strike the U.S. homeland from Afghanistan, and to bring to justice the architects of 9/11. That's been a successful mission. But under Bush and Rumsfeld and Cheney, they allowed it to mutate into this boondoggle of a counterinsurgency. And in situation room after situation room, from Bush all the way through Joe Biden, smarter people than me said, we can't win it. We don't have a political endgame for what is fundamentally a political initiative. And yet President Biden was the first commander-in-chief with the integrity to tell that hard truth to the American people.
How about corruption? We saw, just buckets of money was being piled into Afghanistan. We hear all sorts of stories about people getting paid off and walking off with loads of money. How does that happen? And what do we do about that?
It's an excellent point. I recently said that if I had to sum up the U.S. failure in Afghanistan, it would be sunk cost bias. If I had to sum up the Afghan side of the failure, it'd be corruption. The corruption is at a staggering scale. This is not sort of lubricating the wheels of government. This is a rot within the bureaucracy that really handcuff their ability to provide basic services. And it's a huge disappointment because when the Taliban fell in 2001, there were people like Hamid Karzai who were well positioned to become national leaders who could do what was best for their people as opposed to themselves. And unfortunately, we just didn't see that unfold.
Chairman Chancellor Angela Merkel says, as it seems right now, it was all in vain. Do you feel that way? And do you feel your service there was in vain?
The legacy of a 20-year war in Afghanistan is more complicated than a yes or no or a win or a loss. And I know that's an unsatisfying answer, but it's the truth. The literacy rate in Afghanistan has doubled. The infant mortality rate has halved. Access to electricity has quadrupled. There's 10 times as many kids in school as there were 20 years ago, including 40% of them girls. The Taliban are taking over a country that is fundamentally different than the one that they withdrew from 2 decades ago. And that has to be part of the legacy as well.
More of my interview with Congressman Auchincloss after the break.